Welcome everybody to study session of March 14th, 2023. Okay. Carrie, will you do a roll call, please?
Yes, I will, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Bode. Councilmember Sherman.
Here.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Mayor Inesco.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt.
Here.
Councilmember McDowell. I don't have her on Zoom. Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to excuse? Or do we need a motion? For this
Not
session? We
not
don't.
for a study session,
Okay.
but
And we're good.
Wish them well. Hopefully,
Yeah.
you'll get well soon.
Yes. All right. Community Economic Developer Director Jay Hill has information for us about various housing options.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members for having me here today. I'd like to talk about housing solutions, housing options for our community. And this is housing at all levels of affordability from, and all different types of forms. So looking at everything from starter homes to luxury homes, apartments to subdivisions. There's a lot of things that we can undertake in the city by adding things to our code, taking advantage of options under state statute to increase the production of homes, which would bring more people to our community, kind of help us with vibrancy issues with our economy and bringing in some more businesses and helping support existing businesses. So it has a trickle down effect of just more people brings in more revenue, brings in more excitement, more attention to our community. And so I'm very interested in, hearing what you have to say after I'm done with my presentation. And as I go, if you have any questions, please just feel free to ask, and I'm happy to elaborate. So I'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Let me hit the back button. Okay. So real quick, just some level setting terminology. I might use the term AMI, which is area median income, and that's established by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. And that's the median income for the area that's used to determine affordability, rent burden, cost burden, things like that. So cost burden is defined by HUD as households who spend over 30% of their income on housing costs. That also includes utilities, insurance, property taxes if you own the property, HOA dues. There's a few other things that are included in that as well. Severely cost burdened are households who spend over 50% of their income on housing. Income limits are typically defined as median income, 100% of the area household income. Extremely low income, for example, is 30% or less of the area median income. So a lot of affordability metrics that you'll see go to this moderate to median income, which is usually 80 to 120% of AMI. And so when we talk about workforce housing, it's usually that 80 to 120, because that doesn't necessarily have to be deed restricted. Below 80%, we often see like deed restricted community housing, things that are managed by community housing associations or nonprofits or so on and so on. Yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to stop you like right at the beginning, but having been through, so this topic is interesting, and we've kind of been down this path, and statistics are one area where, when we were pursuing housing before, we had a lot of community debate on the source of our statistics, HUD's numbers versus Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers versus locally collected data. Why do we go with HUD's numbers versus another data source for AMI or things like that?
Most commonly because that's where the funding is established. Section 8 vouchers, HOPE grants, things like that they use HUD's numbers. And so it's easier to talk apples to apples when we're doing that. If we started using Washington state numbers, for example, or locally derived numbers of some type, I don't know if they would be accepted in certain grant applications or certain things, but it's definitely comparing apples to apples. It's speaking the exact same language instead of a different flavor of apple, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Okay.
Appreciate it. You can not do any more apple metaphor.
Okay, thanks. Housing needs. There was a housing needs assessment that was done for Mason County last year. And within that was contained some data for Shelton, the Shelton and combined UGAs, which unfortunately wasn't broken out necessarily. So, but the Shelton UGA is the lion's share of unincorporated urban growth areas within Mason County. And then there was rural county as kind of a separate breakout of that as well. But so within Shelton, 29% of Shelton's rental households are severely cost burdened, which is higher than both Mason County and Washington on average. 19.6% of our households are below poverty line, which again is more than twice the state average. The last point in time count was something like 477 homeless individuals, which it is not necessarily an accurate count, but a continued trend of having more homeless individuals who need supportive housing. And then also contained within that housing needs assessment was a pretty astonishing number. There's 3,216 manufactured homes in the area within Mason County that will be reaching end of life by 2040 and need to be replaced as well. So when we look at what the total housing need in Mason County is, for example, you'll see that the number is something around 11,000. That doesn't include those manufactured homes that are going to be reaching end of life. So it's actually closer to about 14,000 new homes needed in the community by 2043. Within Mason County, currently, there's already a rental market gap. We're missing 651 low-income homes and 752 market rate homes. That's if we built nearly 1,400 homes, actually more than 1,400 homes tomorrow, we would just break even with what the needs are, according to this report by FCS. So I want to talk today about housing options and what are some different approaches that we could take as a city to encourage the production of housing at all levels of affordability and across a variety of different types. So we'll talk about the multifamily zoning district, which we don't have right now, but could. Multifamily tax exemption, which is a tool that developers use to obtain tax relief for their properties in exchange for providing certain benefits to the community. Bonus affordable units, affordable or mandatory inclusionary options, public-private partnerships. Some cities even have pre-approved plans that you can just go in and get a permit for a house that's already engineered and approved to be constructed, and then live work units. So the multifamily zoning district, as I mentioned, we don't have a dedicated multifamily zone. We have the neighborhood residential zone is the predominant zone throughout the city, and we use what's called the planned unit development process to essentially site review every individual location of like an apartment building or a multifamily complex kind of project. So most of the pictures in this presentation are things I snapped from Street View or from my phone. So they're here in town right now. So to build something like what you would see on the screen right now, you'd have to go through the conditional use permit process through the PUD. It's only allowed in certain zones. There's only multifamily zones. There's only a few multifamily zones that allow. Sorry, let me say this again. There's only a few zones that allow multifamily housing as a component as well. And so it does not give developers a lot of certainty. It doesn't give them a lot of options for property. It really is, well, if we could possibly acquire these properties, then we could have some sort of nebulous standard and then go before a hearings examiner to apply the nebulous standard and then try to get a project through in the neighborhood residential. And as we know, a lot of people don't want to see additional density in predominantly single family neighborhood residential zones. And so we've actually only seen the PUD process since it was developed used 3 times. And so the PUD process as it currently exists is a noted barrier to getting more multifamily development. We have a difficulty attracting traditional apartment buildings, complexes, whatever, within our community as a result. We have plenty of them, but our current code doesn't really encourage them. And so we've been working for the last year with BHC, a consultant, to revise our PUD standards to try to figure out if there was a way that we could make the PUD more useful and more attractive. And really, in looking at it, what we need is a multifamily zone, a zone that we apply to large parcels of apartment complexes, places where future apartment complexes could be located, et cetera, and have a specific set of standards that really works well for them. As a planner by profession, I like seeing more of like mixed use projects and things like that, but there's definitely a place for just standard apartment buildings, within communities. And, to the extent that we need more workforce housing, low-income housing kinds of projects, it's a really good tool. And so I would like to create a multifamily zoning district. If the council was interested in it, we could start having those discussions as a pretty quick and easy option, just to make a few places through the community more attractive to this kind of development. The next thing to talk about is multifamily tax exemption, which grants property developers tax exemptions in exchange for well, in one particular case, in the 12-year program, you have to mandate, and this is per the RCW, you have to keep 20% of your units for low and moderate income households. The 8-year program, so you would get tax relief for 8 years. It doesn't have any affordability requirements, so we could use the 8-year program to give someone tax exemptions for 8 years in exchange for building something that we want to see. Now, I was at the city of Redmond as the long-range planning manager there, and I implemented our new MFTE program. It had just been adopted when I got there, and I got to bring that online, and it resulted in thousands of new units of new construction in Redmond. Yes.
That's just our portion of taxes, not the counties or the states.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Which, okay. Would that include levies or no?
That
No,
I can look that
I mean, the
up.
city's portion of the property tax, we can't forgive like
What-
fire district.
what's
levy.
been voted
That's their
on.
own- Yeah,
but
Correct.
we can verify that.
I will look into that. I
That's-
don't want to speak out of turn on
I
that, but
mean,
I
75% of the taxes are voter approved.
So in Redmond, for example, our 8-year program actually had an affordability standard attached to it. And then the 12-year program had a deeper affordability standard attached to it. And that was in an attempt to get more units at a deeper level of affordability. In a case where, like Shelton, for example, if there's areas that we want to see redevelopment, maybe a empty block, 2 blocks from City Hall that we wanted to see something grow on, for example, we can set our target areas for the MFTE program and say, like, this 8-year program, for example, is just to encourage development, but they could take advantage of the 12-year program. And so it gives them that exemption for either the 8 or 12-year period of time. In the case where the affordable housing has been provided, it's for the life of the project. So that's assuming a 30 to 50-year lifespan on some of these buildings that are being constructed. And so we're, giving a very small amount of our taxes for, this permanently, essentially dedicated affordable housing. And the life of the project is, it varies depending on, how long the building is going to stay standing, for sure. But it's definitely, I've seen it used to great effect. I helped the city of Lake Forest Park get their MFTE regulations established. It's been a really good tool for attracting people because, I'm not a developer, but the developers tell us that the math works out very well to make these things pencil in these like denser urban areas. So bonus and mandatory units. So we'll talk about these kind of together. Bonus units, the concept is you're just allowing someone to have one additional unit or some number, we'll say one additional unit of density per affordable unit provided. So if somebody were to do a 10-unit project and were to have one of their units be affordable, they could build an 11-unit project. And so what that ends up doing is that one unit is then deed restricted for permanent affordable housing. The developer has gotten the ability to build more units for sale or rent, which usually brings them more revenue. So it's in their interest to do this bonus. The mandatory inclusionary, as it's been done in a lot of communities, requires the set aside. It's not just a bonus. It's not a voluntary thing. It's much more successful because not everybody wants to build low income affordable housing. So if you really want that in your community, you can do the mandatory. I've seen that typically used as 10% of units in a project with 10 or more units. So if somebody's just doing, a duplex or a fourplex or something like that, we're not requiring them to do some outwardly large number, disproportionate number of units as the affordable. And then you do the same thing. You provide the bonus unit to accommodate that affordable unit that's been provided. So if somebody does a project of 10 units, they have to provide the one bonus unit, or they have to provide the one affordable unit, and then you give them the additional bonus unit. There's other ways where you can set up the affordable units as a bonus unit. There's a lot of different tax that we could take with how we write our code. The key is trying to balance it in such a way that the development still pencils for the developers. And if you can get it to pencil in a way that is actually in their favor.
What would our goal be for how many homes that we start that with? What's normally, would they start with 50 homes and they have to do the 10%, or 25 homes, they have to do the 10%?
In the communities that I've worked in before, it's been 10 homes. That's been kind of the threshold. Like once you go into the double digits, then it makes sense to have the 10% as the set aside.
What if they own the 370 acres and they build 9 homes, and then a month when those are done, they build 9 more? And can they get away with not doing that?
The way that works, the way that we make that work, anything below, I believe, 8 units or 8 lots when you create now is a short plat. You can't do a short plat on the same parent parcel within 5 years.
Okay.
So there's that 5-year exclusionary period. Once you get into a subdivision, which is, if I remember correctly, 9 or more, someone could do a subdivision for 9. And we would take a look at those code provisions to make sure it all matches up before we implemented something like this.
And there's some statutes that require like any projects within 5 years to be considered as a same project. There's substantial improvement requirements. There's the SEPA process, for example. So if a very large subdivision came in, 500 homes or something like that, we would consider that all in one. We wouldn't consider it as each individual home gets constructed or each phase necessarily. We would consider it as the whole of the project. And so we would, for a large project, we're assuming a very large subdivision of 500 homes. The 10% of that would be 50 additional homes that would be set aside as affordable inclusionary. So part of this, though, is that if you generate a lot of these units, you need somebody to manage them. And so that would either need to be a county housing authority, a nonprofit, someone is your agency that manages the ownership, rental, maintenance, those kinds of things of some of these homes. So upskilling your local housing providers along with this is really important.
How would that work if it was an affordable home that somebody purchased and then they want to sell it in 5 years?
They're usually basically the sale is managed by the housing provider. So I can use Arch as an example. It's the kind of King County Regional Coalition for Housing. And they cover most of the east side of King County, and they hold the covenant on the properties. And so when you go to sell, you can only sell it to another person who qualifies at the income levels, and you're only allowed a certain percentage of appreciation per year on the homes. And there's a whole bunch of different restrictions that go into it to keep the homes affordable. And so somebody doesn't get the benefit of an affordable home and then 5 years later turns around and makes $1 million on selling it or something. They try to prevent that from happening as much as possible. Any other questions about this as a concept?
I think it's a great idea, actually.
Right. And again, tonight, I'm just sharing ideas, and at the end, we can kind of go back to, things that you would like to direct us to explore more and bring back in, ordinance form. Some of it, like the multifamily zone, we could start work on now and then kind of wrap that up as part of the comp plan, because we would need to do a comp plan amendment to add that and apply the zone and so on and so on. So that one's like a little bit longer of a project. Some of these are things that we could do now, tomorrow, just really depends.
I like everything you presented so far. I mean, we got to get started somewhere. I mean, what we're doing is not working. So
next is public-private partnerships. The city has recently undertaken one with the Veterans Village project, but there's a lot of other types of partnerships that we can engage in. We can collect and allocate funding to buy units in projects. I've seen cities where they actually have purchased some of the units to use as workforce housing. So if a apartment complex was, let's say they wanted to build 50 apartments in a building, the city could actually say, hey, we want to purchase using our affordable housing funds or our workforce housing fund or something like that, purchase units within the projects. And not only does that help make some projects with low income components more affordable, it also sometimes works as either permanent or transitional housing for city employees. And sometimes that's really difficult to attract people. I've worked in a bunch of resort communities where it was almost essential to have city housing for transitions because there's nowhere to land. There's nowhere to stay for, a year until you find the right place. It's very, very competitive housing in some of those markets. Also, it's attractive in some cases for, if you can't necessarily pay competitive wages, but you can provide housing for a period of time while people are relocating. And it's something that we could consider if there were projects that were coming online. Cities can provide land. Like I said, we just, have done that. And it's been probably one of the greatest gifts that we can give to affordable developers is land, because they're not making any more of it. It's hard to find, and especially it's hard to find it below market value. Cities are prohibited from creating a gift of public funds, but we can sell, lease, or contribute land at below market rates for, quote, support of the poor and infirmed, and that's from the Washington State Constitution. So we're allowed to do it. My suggestion is to, do it in places where we'll get the most bang for the buck too. We've got 30 tiny homes, for example, at Veterans Village. But, if we were to look at, what is the carrying capacity of a similarly sized parcel, 2.5 acres, in downtown, maybe we could get 100 apartment units on something like that. So, really trying to maximize the contribution that we provide and the return that we obtain as a community. Some city-owned property is held by special funds. The hospital, the property that's being sold to the hospital, for example, is owned by the water fund. There's a couple of other properties that are owned by various different funds or special purchases or whatnot. And so, those are possible properties to use for some kind of redevelopment. We just need to make sure that, if it was purchased by the sewer fund, that the sewer fund is made whole through the sale or transfer or whatnot. So there could be like an internal cost, but not necessarily an external cost to doing some of those kinds of projects. Pre-approved plans. This has been very common and pretty successful with predominantly ADUs, accessory dwelling units that people have put in their backyard or on additional, parcels that they own adjacent to their main parcel or whatnot. But I've seen communities that have like full-size houses, 800, 1,200 square feet of pre-engineered plans. And so the idea, and actually our building official is really interested in this as a concept, that we would have, a certain number of plans that we purchase from an architect or whatnot, have them available. They're already pre-engineered, they're pre-approved. We just come in and make sure that, your zoning's correct, your site plan's correct, and, out the door basically to get your homes constructed. So not only does that bring down the cost of construction, it brings down the approval times for construction. It's been very effective, and you can have some really nice houses. I grabbed a bunch of pictures of small cottage ADU kind of things, but you can have them as large as you want based on standard city lot sizes and things like that. Live work units. I did not get this picture from the city of Shelton. I got this from Redmond, where I used to work, because I think these are very, very cool. They're essentially townhouses where you've got the residences above and the office and shop space below. So on this particular street, there's a massage therapist, a pet supply store, a computer repair shop, a little cafe, a couple of other things where the business is down below, and you can literally see the stairs up in the back going up to the residential unit up above and behind. This allows one investment in real estate instead of two. You can buy one building, where you have your business and your home, and they're specifically designed and covenanted to be used for that. Legally live in your business, yes. And this attracts artists. It attracts a lot of independent professionals, who might have attorneys, accountants, limited medical professionals, things like that, where you have a kind of a pedestrian walk-up office space. And so we don't currently have them as an enumerated use in our code. We have kind of a vague reference to mixed use development, which this kind of is, but I'd like to see it go a step further, and we actually allow live work units, call them out. And this could go into the multifamily zone, or it could go into our downtown zones, et cetera, but really trying to set up this as not just a form that we allow, but that we encourage. There's a lot of funding options to consider that we may or may not be taking advantage of. Some of them are taken advantage of at the county level, some of them are city level, but they're all things that we can consider if we wanted to build affordable housing funds. Again, some of them are, there's the real estate excise tax, which is 0.25% of transactions that can be used for affordable housing. There's the availability of an affordable housing levy. There's a sales tax credit, and so on and so on. So, if the community wants to build a fund and a program and get serious about the production of affordable housing, for workforce housing, for low income housing, things like that. There's a lot of opportunities out there. And it's really, do we want to use 1, 2, 3, all of these options to try to sort this out? Or, is that there are other ways that we could do that? And like I mentioned before, we have land donations, sales to below market value to nonprofit developers, other things that we can do to also kind of fund the provision of affordable housing without, necessarily putting a burden on taxpayers or residents. There have been a lot of studies that have shown the value of having affordable housing. I saw one in San Francisco that showed that actually land values went up around where affordable housing was constructed, because, and it seems counterintuitive, why would land values go up around affordable housing? It's because the new affordable housing is modern, it's attractive, it's, a little bit higher density, it's got different features, and a lot of times it's mixed income projects. So you're also bringing in people who are making, 200% AMI, people who are, maybe more well-to-do, but they want to live in an apartment, or they, get one of the larger apartments in the building, or so on and so on. And so it actually increases property values. It increases revenue to the city. It increases our ability to modernize and improve our infrastructure as well. So there's a lot of benefits to creating the affordable housing, as much as, we might hear from people who are worried about the impacts of it. I like to remind people that a lot of those people that are living in affordable, workforce housing are our teachers, there are firefighters, there are city workers, they're people we need for our community to thrive. And those people are the ones that if they're living here, they're spending their tax dollars here. They're not spending it by commuting. They're, coaching Little League, things like that. So I like to remind people, that they're not a burden. They're part of our community, and they're providing essential services and becoming our friends and neighbors. So, and that map that I have there is not coincidentally a map of city-owned properties. And I don't expect anybody to be able to read it from here, but essentially it shows what properties we have that are available for surplus. Some of them are held by special funds. Some of them we could get rid of tomorrow, so on and so on. But like, as I mentioned, land donation, sales, being able to repurpose property is one of the easiest low-hanging fruits the city can do.
So what colors mean what on this map?
Unfortunately, I cropped the legend off. I think the orange were the ones that we might need to keep. The greens were ones we could get rid of, and the yellows, I think, are ones that are owned by special funds or something like that. I can confirm that, but I think that's what it is.
Can you send that back out to us? I know you sent this to us a few months ago.
Yeah,
You sent it back out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, what was that? Oh,
So the parks, current parks are in green. Orange, I believe, is water fund, if I'm not mistaken. And there's some purple on there that is sewer fund. Well, I can't really see it from here.
and there were some that were unknown, I think.
Yeah,
And
we did this study of what city-owned properties we owned, and had everybody in the city take a look at it and see, are we gonna need this in the next 50 years? And we did that, 2021, something like that. So this is the map that we've been working off of, but the other thing that's really driving this, and kind of separate from this conversation, is we have to pay insurance on each one of these. And you guys know how much our insurance rates have gone up. So lowering our insurance liability was also a driving factor.
Yeah, so I'd be interested in a accurate breakdown, because obviously we can't build in parks, things like that.
No, and I'd be happy. I'll send this map out with your update on Friday.
was the green all just parks, or was it?
No, not entirely. It doesn't incorporate parks, but it's also site lands that are used for recreation purposes. Properties up on Spring Road. Look like they're in green, which a lot of properties that might have some use now or in the future.
So I'd also be interested in, so after we get this map a little more tied down to make sense for us, possible locations for those multifamily zones, because obviously you can't put them everywhere, right? There's gonna be rules and regulations on that, and I'd love to see where those possible zones are. And that, and this, after we kind of tighten this up, then the property that the land could potentially the city could provide in a way. I'd love to see where those spots are, because I think that would help a lot to understand what our possibilities are. But pre-approved plans, yes. Live work units, yes. And housing is important, so I feel like we need to look at all our options for funding.
Yeah, so the pre-approved plans can work, and we've seen them work. The things that I've talked to council a little bit about before is each area is gonna have a different snow load, each is gonna have a different wind load, each is gonna have a different soil type, so that can complicate things a little bit, but it's not insurmountable.
I mean, Shelton's only what, 3 by 3, right? Approximately. 3 by miles by 3 miles.
Oh,
The other thing that came up with stock plans was just, is there an appetite for it? And it didn't really seem that way. You're talking with other cities that have done it, you know, it's like, yeah, we did it, we spent $100,000 on stock plans and
right.
everybody shows up, they think it's great. Do they actually come out and build a project? Not really.
Right.
And then the other part of it is, you know, yeah, you kind of mentioned every location's different, but then everybody, the orientation or where it's located on the property may not be actually feasible. And so it still behooves people to get somebody to design their project, get a contractor on board, get advisement through that direction too.
And typically you don't, at least in my experience, I don't know, Jay's might be different. You might see those approved plans used for like an infill lot, but
Right.
not for a subdivision.
Or an ADU, I can
Or an
see
ADU,
that making a lot of sense and making the investment in that.
Mhm.
Which is, you know, it could get costly and if we don't get a return on it, it's kind of.
I think Longview had stock plans, didn't they? And she told me.
Lacey does.
Or Lacey does.
Yeah, we remember, we met with
Yeah.
them in the county, because we've been talking about this, and the other piece is in the UGA, that those plans would be compatible in the UGA, whether it's city or the county, right? So they could go to the county planning department, get same set of plans that would be cross compatible, but we need that common development code to make that all happen too, so.
And that happened today.
And I have another question. I know that you're really involved in bigger plans, right? You see the bigger picture. So potentially, if we have this map a little more detailed on, oh, these are the possibilities. Is there any way that we can send this information to potential national developers to get them thinking about Shelton? Maybe we're not on their radar right now. Maybe they don't know we're here, but maybe if somehow we can get a hold of them and say, hey, we're here and we're ready.
For the city-owned properties, it could only be kind of like low-income, affordable developers, things like that. But generally speaking, having a map where we kind of advertise, you know, larger properties that might be for sale and whatnot, we could work with realtors, with some of the larger property owners who've expressed interest in development to do that. I would caution, like, I wouldn't want to advertise somebody's property as being suitable for development without them coming to us and being like, hey, can you please market my property? But, you know, for example, there might be a very large piece of property to the southwest corner of town that is owned by a very prominent family that maybe they want to develop it, and we can go talk to the DR Hortons and the, you know, the different developers around the area. I've got really good connections at actually a lot of them from my time in Redmond. And so being able to go talk to people and see, you know, TriPoint, are you interested in building, you know, a project here? You know, like I can market that if I've got properties that want to be marketed for sure.
Could we do like an RFP, like, hey, we want an eco village similar to the Veterans Village, but for seniors, and say, we want RFPs from all over the country. We want you to use like carbon capture, hempcrete and all this stuff. Can we like put like a list of stuff and say, this is the piece of land that we want to develop under these circumstances and have development done that way?
We can, but it would have to be at market rate. So the only way we can donate or otherwise participate if it is, as Jay mentioned in the Constitution, to support the poor and firm. Other public benefits, you know, we could take a look at that, but it would have to be at market, is my understanding.
And could we also do something that's like for essential workers, especially city employees, you know, like neighborhoods, stuff like that, and maybe decrease the square footage from, you know, 4,500 to 3,000 and have, you know, tiny house, like, they're not trailers, but, you know, what's the difference between a trailer and a tiny house, right? Marketing, but you know, I mean, something like that, right? So could we replace the units we might lose from these temporary trailer parks and have like tiny house villages as our model instead of like a Leviton, and we have, you know, green lawns, throwing chemical fertilizer on it. Can we have like eco village Levitons, and Shelton becomes the housing capital of the world for small, you know, small unit buildings? Can we do something like that?
So what you might be talking about is cottage housing, which is it's typically, you know, 1,000 square feet or less. It's kind of what the original, you know, starter homes were, you know, back in the 1940s. You know, if you go look at all the cute neighborhoods in Seattle, for example, it's all these little 800 square foot homes that
That Victory Garden too.
Yeah. You know, that was the starter home of the time, and you know, people have built onto them over time and whatnot, and that's a great way to increase affordability because, you know, if you talk to realtors, you'll see, you know, they talk in dollars per square foot on sales. And, you know, so if you've got fewer square feet, you can have nice homes that are just smaller. For example, I don't need an entire bedroom in my current house.
Especially for our population, there's a lot of seniors who don't want to have a lot of maintenance.
Exactly. And so the cottage homes are a great way for people who are just starting out, for people who want to downsize. They usually are kind of built around a courtyard or something like that. I worked on cottage regulations in Redmond and for King County, and they're a great way to encourage a kind of a niche product. There's not a lot of developers currently doing them, but they're a very cool product, and I would love to see more of them.
So that's something we can pursue as an option. Or like, I don't want to add, I want to add to your list because I want to do housing first at all levels.
You're really getting at with like inclusionary zoning.
It is, but a cottage development is something a little bit different. It's common open space, so you don't really have your own
It's not
yard.
It's not a key.
Correct.
Yeah, it's condominiumized ownership of the homes, and then the property is owned by an
But
HOA.
the ones that I've seen are typically single level. So what the real market is there are for empty nesters. You know, that's, at least that's what I've seen.
And that's gonna be a huge thing. I mean, the population and nation is aging and, you know, we've heard of potential growth of Christmas Village, right? So there's some pent-up demand there, to cater to. Interesting.
But adding, you know, cottage housing and supporting regulations and design standards and things like that is something that we could definitely explore and undertake if that was, you know, interest by the council. So.
And I do really love your public-private partnerships, and I do love the downtown, and I encouraging all of these in housing first. And, you know, what we've kind of settled on was sort of a net zero effect, but we're not really dealing with housing so much. So I really love that every level we should approach. And I agree with the mayor and I agree with the council member here. We have a lot of appetite for having housing solutions. So thank you.
On the multifamily zoning districts, we're probably gonna have to address the height limit too, when you rewrite these.
Correct. Yeah, our current height limit isn't really conducive to a lot of multifamily zoning, and there's a lot of places where the height limit could be increased, and I don't think a lot of people would even notice. We have very tall trees around here that do really good jobs of breaking up the sight lines. And so I think we could do a little bit more and people wouldn't even blink.
Again, we've, you know, been down the discussion around affordable housing, you know, having PTSD from that a few years ago. But, you know, one of the things I think, especially when we're talking about regulations, and we're talking about taxes or fees or impact fees and stuff like that, you know, sometimes, you know, the public looks at that as, you know, we're being heavy handed, we're overreaching, over regulating. But I kind of, over the years, I've learned that this isn't that at all. This is actually managing growth. And taking into account as we grow the existing population that is here today. And so as a 1,500 unit housing market rate housing comes on board, for 100 units or whatever it is, there is a provision to take care of the people who are currently living here and paying taxes here, who have been, you know, establishing roots in our community. And I'm a fan of that. And as long as we go through this in a responsible way, we weigh everything out. Again, I think managed growth versus unmanaged growth is, you know, the way to go. And yeah, I'm excited to see some of these options kind of come to fruition. And you know, my other question is, you know, what happens when you do have a developer that doesn't want to do anything affordable, and we haven't created any ordinance around it because, you know, we avoided the regulation on that. Let's say, what about the housing sort of impact fee? If they choose to not do an affordable component, is there an impact that we can assess on that project?
To my knowledge, you're only allowed to assess impact fees under state law for fire, utilities, parks and schools. And so we're pretty limited. There's the legislature has set up other tools to obtain funding for affordable housing, but impact fees, to my knowledge, is not one of them. So.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any either. And to kind of expand a little bit on that question. I think that Jay mentioned earlier that you can designate those areas for the multifamily tax exemption. It wouldn't be citywide. Right. At least I don't think that would be our recommendation. We would just target specific areas and we would look for areas where the infrastructure, especially the road network and transportation options, are already more robust for the higher density project. But yeah, that's how we would look at those types of things. But a housing impact fee, I don't think is anything that is.
That
Yeah,
could be another way you can go about it. If it's
Sure.
only utility based and
yeah,
you're gonna impact sewer and water utility, then those impact fees increase because you're not doing an affordable component. Potentially.
and we can take a look at that.
And I would like to add, for the production of housing at all levels of affordability, I have 4 subdivisions that I'm currently negotiating with in the community that, not Peacock Ridge, just for full disclosure, but 4 subdivisions totaling about 800 units that we don't have the water for right now. And so being able to provide infrastructure, being able to provide reservoir storage and instantaneous flow capacity and things like that would do wonders for encouraging the production of homes. I mean, literally had another meeting today where I told people like, we're working on this, but it's a kind of a longer term solution. I'm also working on some shorter term solutions to try to help bring some funding to the table, make a partnership, et cetera. But until we can get some of those things online, these are all on hold. And even some of these other options that I've presented today are going to be difficult to accomplish, except in some very limited circumstances in the city right now. So just as we talk about affordable housing, just to keep that on the back burner, that infrastructure is critical, and we have a deficiency in our water infrastructure right now that really needs to be addressed. And once
Just the storage.
just the storage, some of the transmission, but mostly the storage. And so hopefully, if we can, I'll keep working on my code components. I'll keep working on the subdivision components. Public Works works on the water storage issue, and together we, are ready to go when these developers are coming through our door.
Any other questions or comments? We'll have, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Does council have any new items for discussion tonight? If not, this meeting is adjourned at 6:42 p.m.